This is Agriculture Today, and I'm Shelby Varner with the K-State Radio Network. Beginning today's show is part of a Fins, Fur, and Feathers podcast episode as Drew Ricketts and Joe Gerken chat with graduate student Grace Lansdell about her project on deterrents for herons. Kansas Corn CEO Josh Rowe keeps the show rolling as he explains the recent decision made in Kansas that involves higher ethanol fuel blends and the potential impact on farmers and customers. Mike Brouk, K-State dairy specialist, ends today's show discussing how Kansas dairy producers can benefit from the expanding market of protein powder produced from whey. That and more is coming up ahead. You're tuned in to Agriculture Today, and we start our Tuesday show with part of a Fins, Fur, and Feathers podcast episode from K-State wildlife specialist Drew Ricketts and K-State fisheries and aquatics extension specialist Joe Gerken, as well as Joe Gerken's graduate student Grace Lansdell, as they discuss her project.
Why don't you tell us briefly about what your project is and then why you were excited about it?
Yeah, so it is I'm looking at non-lethal bird deterrents at fish farms in the Midwest, so Michigan, Missouri, and Kansas. And there's a lot of bird predation at these fish farms, so we're trying to get rid of the herons so that the farmers can make money. And it was interesting to me, again, because that fish component, but I didn't realize that I'd become a bird person in the process. So that's been really fun, and grown to appreciate all the different birds. So it's been really, really fun.
Well, I mean, this is a pretty cool project that's kind of bridging the gap between fish management and wildlife management, looking at human-wildlife conflicts and that sort of thing. So why is it important to think about non-lethal approaches to managing predation at fish farms, especially for the species that we're thinking about? Right.
Yeah, these birds are protected. So they're migratory birds, these great blue herons. That's what we're studying. And it's important that they be non-lethal because, we don't want to kill their populations. They're, important to protect. And, farmers can obtain a bird permit to get rid of these birds and to shoot them, but it's really not effective in the long term. There's just so many of them. So it's important that they use non-lethal deterrents to try and scare them away. That's the big thing, scaring and exclusion with the non-lethal deterrents.
And so a lot of it, a lot of what you're looking at are a couple different techniques. One of them was lasers. Drew, you just got to use some lasers in a different setting, scared off some vultures from a house, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so it's something that is used fairly commonly, right? But why don't you tell us about the deterrents that you got to use and what was, maybe a little bit more unique about them compared to some of the others on the market?
Yeah, so we used a laser deterrent, and then we also used, it's called a sonic net acoustic deterrent. Now, the laser deterrent is pretty neat because traditionally the lasers that farmers use, they have to hand hold them, and I think that's the one you use with the vultures. But, in your experience, you got to be there. You have to be shooting them. You have to, spend time trying to deter them. But this new emerging deterrent laser, it's automated, so it runs 24/7, and it's random. That's the big thing here is we're trying to provide a way that the birds don't get used to it to prevent habituation. So that's the laser deterrent. The farmers have an app on their phone. They can tell the deterrent where to go, which is really neat. They can tailor it to their farm and to problem areas in their farm. But yeah, and it's a green laser. People think when I say laser that they go poof, but again, these birds are protected. So we're going to make sure that we're treating them with respect and just trying to scare them away, not provide any physical injury to them. The sonic net deterrent, that one is neat because it emits a whole bunch of frequencies that target bird communication. A big thing with animals when they communicate, they're trying to warn off predators. They want to be in communication and know when a predator's coming. But with the sonic net deterrent, it's blocking that ability. So it makes them feel really unsafe, and hopefully they'll want to leave the farm. So we were excited to test both of those out.
So life as a graduate student, I imagine you were in a cozy situation the whole time. And
Oh,
And
yes.
why don't you tell us a little bit about your project and kind of how you measured the effectiveness of these lasers and acoustic systems?
Yeah, we did a camera trap survey. So we had a whole bunch of trail cameras for all you hunters out there. We set them up around the ponds at these fish farms. We put them on T-posts, and they took pictures all day. So we were trying to see what was happening throughout the entire day. And then at night, they were motion triggered. So any movement, if a heron was stalking its prey on the shoreline, it would be able to pick that up. And then we also did some observations. This was where most of my field work came in. We were in a blind, and we had binoculars, and we had night vision binocular. That was really cool. But we were out there during the day and during the nighttime just seeing what was going on, what kind of behavior we could see for every treatment. So we did the laser, we did the acoustic, and we did both of them together in an integrated pest management approach. And after that, we got a whole bunch of images of herons. We saw some cool behavior with the herons, and yeah, it was a very fun project. Of course, some challenges, being out there by yourself in a blind at night. That was a little eerie, but it was also really cool, I mean, How often you get to do that? And then you see a heron, and it was a really neat experience. And I'm so glad that I got to do it.
The herons that you saw at night, were they great blue herons or were they night herons?
Mm-hmm. They were great blues.
Okay,
so,
cool.
Yeah, great blue herons are able to feed 24/7. They're largely crepuscular, so that means that they feed during the twilight hours, so at dusk and dawn. But, they were feeding all throughout the day and all throughout the night.
Very cool.
So you got a bunch of images, right? We had about 100 cameras, I think, total, maybe a little bit over that out, and they're taking pictures every 5 minutes. They're doing this all summer long and a little bit into the fall. So we ended up, how many images did we end up with?
It was over 3 million.
Over 3 million.
Wow.
Right?
Awesome. Yeah.
And so that's a lot, right?
It's a lot.
And so sorting through all those would take a lot of time. And so we decided to work with some collaborators at the USDA to develop an artificial intelligence neural network model, right? And that was able to help us to sort through a bunch of different images. But really, I want to highlight, that's I think a really good use of artificial intelligence in science instead of having a human sort through.
I'm sure thankful, yeah.
Instead of having Grace sort through 3 million images, and it still takes time, right? But we put it in run this code through this model. And how accurate was it, Grace? Was it pretty good?
Yeah, we hand calculated a subset of images. It was 96% accurate,
Wow.
So it was pretty darn good.
Yeah.
So we're very excited about that.
Most people want it to be 100. So are you happy with 96%?
I'm very happy with 96%. I mean, considering that we had 3 million images, if I was looking at 3 million images, I can guarantee you it would not be 96% accurate. So
Right.
I'm very happy with that.
Yeah, and you did a good job of working on that with the collaborators because the model can detect parts of a heron. They can detect multiple herons that are far away, herons that are close. So that was a really cool aspect of the project, I think.
Yeah, and I didn't expect that. I think we were thinking about a couple things. What do we do? And then we landed on that, and that was a whole nother world to me. So I was very happy to be doing that and learning about that. And because when you hear AI, you're a little scared. It's like, oh, but there's really beneficial uses of it, and I think this was a really great example of that.
What were your findings with the project? Do the deterrents, acoustics and lasers, get rid of all the birds, or what did you find?
We found that the birds just are really stubborn. They like to be at the site. So we didn't see any kind of decrease in detections with any of the deterrents, which was unexpected. But, considering how herons use these fish farms, they just have it's called high site fidelity. They just want to be there. But with the lasers during our observations, and this is why our observations were so important to this project, we found that the birds did not like the laser. They acted very strange. They did some stress behaviors. And so I think that's a really important piece of this project that, although we didn't see a decrease in detections, they did display that behavior. And I think that's a really important part of our story.
Yeah, from a farmer's perspective, I don't care if the birds are there if they're not actively eating all my fish, right?
Right.
So,
yeah.
One of the things with Drew and I, we talk a lot about extension and how our role is kind of to take the science and get it out to people that aren't scientists, right? And so, have you done any extension related activities with your work, and if so, what are they? And just kind of share a little bit about that perspective as a grad student.
Yeah, we've done quite a bit actually trying to get the word out, because at the end of the day, we're doing this project for the farmers. It's not just because we can get another grant in. It's because we care about the farmers and we want to help them out. We've done a handful of different things to get the word out. Danny, who is the producer of this podcast, we made a video on our YouTube channel, and initially just introducing the project, and now we plan on doing one as an update with the project. So that's one way. We've made infographics with our collaborators at Purdue University with Amy Schomback. She's done a great job getting the word out to Midwestern farmers about our results. And then we're also going to do a webinar, and that's going to be later in the month. And I'm excited to share with farmers in a presentation what we've learned. And I've also gone to a lot of different conferences to present about what I've learned. I just went to the Midwestern Warm Water Conference, and that was just a bunch of farmers, and we just chatted through what I found, and that was really neat, getting to hear their feedback and what they thought about it.
So you want to work for a state agency, probably stay in the fish realm is what you're thinking?
Yep. Yeah, for sure. And aquaculture is interesting to me. My project, I've worked at aquaculture facilities for the last 2 years, and it's very interesting, particularly with the conservation species, the ones that are of concern. I think that really interests me. So we'll see what opportunities arise from that.
Once again, that was K-State graduate student Grace Lansdell, as well as K-State's Drew Ricketts and Joe Gerken. If you'd like to hear this full podcast episode, you can do so by following the link in today's show notes on agtoday.net or by searching for Fins, Fur, and Feathers on your favorite podcast platform. We're cutting to a short break now on Agriculture Today, but stick around because we have more for you up ahead. You're tuned in to Agriculture Today, and we continue our show discussing higher ethanol blends with Kansas Corn CEO Josh Rowe. Josh, thanks for joining us today.
Yeah, hi Shelby. Thanks for having me on.
As we're thinking about higher ethanol blends, what was recently signed by Kansas Governor Laura Kelly?
Kind of the culmination of effort that's been ongoing for 3 years now. In that, so the governor recently signed a bill into law that provides a tax credit of 5 cents per gallon for fuel retailers in the state of Kansas for every gallon of kind of E15 and above. So fuel defined as E15 and above. And through that, this has been an effort pushed by the Kansas fuel retailers and the ethanol industry that we've obviously been very supportive of for the past 3 years. And, that's usually what it takes in a state level politics, moving things through the legislature. You're usually not successful your first try, but ultimately this year we were successful. And it actually, what it does is there was a tax incentive on the books that provided fuel retailers tax credit incentive for upgrading their infrastructure through that. But what we've seen for E15, it doesn't, for most fuel retailers, like any pump that's been installed in the past 12 years, it's already compliant to sell E15. So there's not a lot of needed infrastructure upgrades. So that tax credit just didn't make the most sense as it was for fuel retailers. And so it was repurposed into something just a lot easier for the retailers, easier for the state to administer. That is just simply a fuel retailer will report their gallons sold and then be eligible for that tax credit. It's not a full-blown refund through that, but really good and happy to do so. I'm glad that Kansas can join other states. Our neighbors in Missouri and Nebraska have the same tax credit, have had it on the books for the last few years, and it's been very successful, and it shows it's greatly helped with the increased adoption of E15 by retailers in those states. And this has been a space that Kansas Corn's worked in for over 10 years, assisting retailers on this front, and we'll hopefully look at seeing that same level of success that we had in Kansas that they've seen in other states.
And as you've mentioned, Kansas Corn has worked on this for multiple years, and I'm assuming this is something then beneficial for your farmers?
Yeah, absolutely. You just look at the numbers overall. So I guess kind of stepping back, about a third of our corn in Kansas that's produced goes into ethanol production. Been something that's highly benefited farmers. It's a huge benefit to our livestock industry as they utilize the high protein co-products from the ethanol plants there. And Kansas consumers, we purchase it's usually around 1.1 billion gallons of fuel. So that's where we're at. We're not a huge gasoline state, but that's big. And if we just do the basic math through that, a vast majority of the fuel sold in Kansas is E10 or a 10% blend. But as we continue to have more offerings of higher ethanol blends available, so I just kind of look at what if we increase that blend by an average of 1%. So on average, we're selling, 11% ethanol fuel. That's 110 million gallons of ethanol more. And doing the math through that, that's, a significant amount of corn, specifically 5.7 million bushels of corn more for just a 1% thing. So, I'm not going to sit here today and predict that, hey, this is going to raise corn prices in Kansas X percent. There's a lot of other factors that go into this, but, we do know success shows from the past as we saw the ethanol industry build up that as that utilization rate increases demand and is helpful to not only our corn farmers, but our western Kansas plants use a significant amount of grain sorghum in those plants as well.
You mentioned Missouri and Nebraska having this. Is this something that they saw well adopted by customers? And what are you thinking you're going to see for Kansans?
What I hope to see for Kansas, because, we have seen a very large increase in E15 and higher blend adoptions in those states. And, what we're really looking for is to spur additional stations. It's great that our retailers in the state that have already adopted E15, that they can benefit from this, but we're just hoping that's that next step. And that's what, as we work with fuel retailers on various state and other federal programs available there, that it will help spur additional things. Now we're just under 200 stations in the state of Kansas that sell E15. So it's not, it's not something new, and that it's not really hard to find E15. Of course, there's areas of the state I wish it was more widely available in. But, it would be great within a few years over the life of this tax credit. I want to at least double that number of stations. And right now, E15 is running at least a 20% price discount to E10, depending on where you're at with the retailer there. And that makes a big difference, especially right now where we're faced with really high fuel prices. So every little bit helps the consumer out there. And latest stats I showed, about 98% of all vehicles on the road today are compatible to use E15. So it's readily available. We can use it you can use it in your current vehicles, and then fuel retailers can adopt it without major infrastructure upgrades for the most part.
Is corn the only crop you're seeing that could potentially have benefits from this?
I really think this has just as big of impacts for grain sorghum. I look at grain sorghum; they've had significant issues on the export side with the China market shutting off. So there's a lot of excess grain sorghum out there in the state of Kansas, and if can continue to spur and bolster ethanol production, it will utilize a significant amount of bushels of grain sorghum as well.
Is this a conversation about E15 that you think you're going to see in the Kansas legislature again?
I think at the state level, from the legislative front, I think what will the fuel retailers and those that have supported this bill will be, hey, let's let this thing run, see what the success is, and go from there through that. So really, at the state level, there's not, of course, there's continued issues that need to be fixed nationwide. So in DC, I'm hoping that some of the roadblocks to E15 adoption get solved in the near future in DC, and that's probably about 95% of what I'm working on with our members of Congress on that front.
So if we know Missouri, Nebraska, Kansas have this, are there other states that have also adopted E15 more into their legislature and gas stations?
Yeah, through that. And some states, Iowa and Illinois, and Minnesota would be what I call the original states of having these tax credits available. Iowa and Nebraska have went that next step, and that might be a step too far for what we can see in Kansas. And they actually have rules on the books for any time a station is built or upgraded that they must offer E15. They have a E15 requirement on new stations. That's not something that we're looking to pursue in Kansas. It might be a bit too far, but that's some examples we've seen from other states that have really pushed this on to the next level.
So Josh, if everything goes perfectly, you've mentioned DC, what does the future of E15 look like for our Kansas growers, our Kansas drivers, but also our United States growers and drivers?
Yeah, so that's when the numbers get very large overall. So if the United States was able to follow suit like we see in other countries that actually have E15 as their base fuel through that is large. That if E15 was the new base, that would mean a increase in demand of 2.2 billion bushels of corn. That's the big numbers. And, that's something we're always working towards. And again, something that's not going to happen overnight. We need to get some legislation in place that removes those roadblocks that allows fuel retailers just the option, and it gives consumers the option. That's really what we're working towards. But I've seen it, a lot of work with the U.S. Grains Council, countries that have naturally shifted to that E15 baseline just because of the compatibility of the fueling infrastructure, of the cars on the road, and the consumer savings. I've seen it successful in other countries, and so that would be the kind of the ultimate dream for that to happen. But knowing, and I want to kind of come back to the reality of the moment now. We're not sitting here and saying we're going to use 2.2 more billion gallons of ethanol the following year once that gets solved. But that's kind of that pie in the sky. What's the ultimate win that could happen out of this?
If people are wanting to find more information on this, or maybe a fuel station near them that has it, where can they go?
So the best source to find where E15 sold in Kansas is a website that we help support. Is called fueledbykansas, all spelled out, .com. So again, fueledbykansas.com. And if you're looking for just general information on ethanol, how it benefits farmers, and that, we've got a whole variety of resources on our website at kscorn.com.
Josh, I appreciate you taking the time to join us today.
Yeah, thank you, Shelby.
That was Kansas Corn CEO Josh Rowe. I will link the resources that he mentioned in today's show notes on agtoday.net. We're cutting to a short break now, but we'll be right back.
Welcome back to Agriculture Today. Along with Shelby Varner, I'm Jeff Wickman. We end today's program with this week's milk lines. The protein powder produced from whey has created a new marketplace for raw milk. K-State dairy specialist Mike Brouk discusses how Kansas dairy producers can benefit from this expanding market.
Today I'd like to visit with our Kansas dairy farmers concerning some changes in our marketplace, and we think about the products that milk will ultimately be manufactured into across the United States. And there's been some major changes in market demand and some things that have changed within our consumer base that is really going to have a major impact on our markets going forward. Y'all are very aware that we're producing a lot of milk right now, and many of our plants are running at capacity, and it's putting a little bit of a strain maybe on those prices that we're receiving for that raw milk that we're shipping out every week or every day in some cases. So as we think about that and some changes that we see in component prices, we see that there are some things that seem to be rising, and one of those key factors is actually the price of protein powders. The protein powders that we produce from whey have become part of that. It's something that's been growing actually over a period of years, but here in the last couple of years we've seen some major changes, and some of these changes are actually brought on by something that's going on within the health industry here in the United States. There's a lot of people, maybe even a lot of your friends, that may be on a certain type of drug that results in weight loss, and many of those products actually do require a higher intake of protein. Otherwise, the patient will lose protein mass in their body at a faster rate than what is really desirable. So there's this increased protein demand that we have within the consumers, and those that are using weight loss products are willing to pay more for high-quality protein. That is also transferred over into the dairy industry and some of the products that we offer. Just recently, Dairy Farmers of America from Kansas City launched a new type of cottage cheese product. It's called Mulu. It is different than traditional cottage cheese. It contains about 33% more protein than normal cottage cheese, and it contains a different blend of protein, and that is very significant. Most of our protein that is found in normal cottage cheese is casein, and it digests fairly slowly in our digestive tract. Mulu actually has an addition of whey protein to its product, and therefore whey protein will digest quicker. So we have basically a combination of a quickly available protein source in our digestive system, as well as something that's going to stick around in the digestive system for a longer period of time. Last couple of years, that has not been true, and we've seen rapid increase in cottage cheese consumption across the United States. And a lot of that is associated with people looking for something that is of higher quality protein, and often they look toward the dairy case for those types of products. Greek yogurt probably helped us get this thought process started within our consumer base, and something like Mulu comes along now, and it really raises the bar and causes a lot of increased interest in dairy products from our consumers. Moving forward, I think within our consumer base, there'll be this increased interest in those products that have higher quality protein. And based on some of the surveys that we've recently completed, those people are willing to pay more for those higher quality products. As we think about the future of our dairy industry, I think we need to think about products that we might bring to the market that would increase the protein content and increase the health value, if you will, of those particular products. And you're even seeing it in the snack aisle. So we're seeing dairy products show up in a lot of different places than what we might have envisioned even a few years ago. This is Mike Brouk with K-State Research and Extension. Excited about some of the changes we are seeing in the dairy case, as well as other places in the grocery store that utilize products that we produce on our Kansas dairy farms.
Thanks, Mike. And that'll do it for this edition of Agriculture Today. For Shelby Varner, I'm Jeff Wickman. This is the K-State Radio Network.